Yeah, good morning. My name is Gondais, and I'm here on Spotify. You can check out my songs on my Spotify page. But that's not really why I'm having this short talk, or should I say podcast. So, what I want to talk about today is free will. Let's talk about free will. And what is free will? Just in like layman terms, I would say free will is the freedom that everyone has to make choices for themselves to do whatever they want. It's basically like freedom of choice, freedom of expression, freedom of action. And before I go further, I will say I'm not an artist. Yeah, I'm not an artist. I'm actually a Christian who is asking a lot of questions, who is like struggling with a lot of things. So the topic of the talk is the arguments against free will. And the problem with free will is that it is often used to defend God when discussing the problem of evil. And, because sometimes someone will look at the state of the world, the amount of suffering that exists in the world, and start to wonder if God is good, if God is kind, if God is omnipotent, omniscient, omnibenevolent. Why does He allow so much suffering and pain to exist in the world? And Christians often resort to the free will argument. They say that since everybody has free will, then if you choose to murder or sexually assault people or rob or steal or kill, if you choose to do all that, then you are free to do that because God will not stop you. Because if God stops you, that means you are like a robot who can't do what he wants to do, who relies on like programming. Like for example, if God made everyone perfect and everyone only had good intentions and good aspirations, then we can say we are enslaved in a way. We don't have freedom of choice. We are not truly free if we are only good because we were compelled to be good. And that kind of makes sense in a way. It kind of makes sense. And so one important part of the free will defense is that God will not intervene. You know, And to me, that doesn't even make sense because intervening doesn't actually restrict free will. Like, if I wanted to rob my neighbor and God stopped me from doing that, He didn't take away my free will. He just stopped me from using it wrongly. And but the Christians argue that God will not intervene because he doesn't just want to stop the negative effects. Sorry, he doesn't just want to impede my free will. He doesn't also want to impede the negative effects of my free will. And I just don't think that argument makes any sense because if you look at the Bible is littered with examples of when God was intervening in the lives of men. For example, when God parted the Red Sea so that His chosen people, in quotes, would cross the Red Sea, and then He drowned the Egyptians. Those Egyptians who drowned were basically killed by God, and the free will, their free will was actually cut short. They wanted to harm the people of Israel, but because God didn't want that, He cut short their free will by killing them in the Red Sea. And so the Bible is a contradiction actually to say that God will not intervene. Yes, the Bible has so many examples of God intervening. So what happened? Why did He stop intervening? So it's a contradiction to say God will not intervene, but He used to intervene in the past, and He will say, I am the same yesterday, today, and forever. And whenever people want to give examples of God intervening, a lot of times some of those things can be attributed to nature, coincidence, luck. I mean, There are so many examples of of God supposedly intervening that you could actually look for a logical explanation or a natural explanation. Sometimes it could be a natural phenomenon, and so it's like we no longer have those grand examples of like a sea parting, of like a man getting swallowed up by a fish and being in the belly of that fish for 3 days, and or a great flood that covers the entire world. And I'm not saying that I want the flood of that magnitude to come back, but God was intervening a lot in the past, and it's like he just went radio silent. Just look at the world today. Look at the state of. Look at how much evil is happening. Now, moving to the second point, free will was never mentioned in the Bible. Yeah, that's true. So when we often say that evil happens because God has given us free will, I think the premise of that statement is kind of false. Who is to say that we even have free will? Did God ever mention free will in the Bible? Did any of the prophets ever mention it? Did Jesus mention it? Were we expressly told in the Bible that you have free will? Because who is to say that we have free will? For example, if you wanted to buy a pet and I gave you a book that contains everything about a dog, and I gave you another book that contains everything about a cat, and I told you that the pet you must buy should either be a dog or a cat, no other animals. Yes, you still have a choice between a dog and a cat, and you have enough information about it too. But can you call that free will? If I'm the one who is dictating the options, and so if God created the world the way it is, made the rules, and then made it so that his son will come and die, and then people would have to believe in his son to be saved, and that people who won't believe in his son will be tortured forever in eternal flames. Can we say we have free will if those are the options? If God Himself created the options, and then He also made it so that there are like over 1,000 religions in the world, and anyone who is unlucky enough to be born in the wrong part of the world or who fails to find Him will also be condemned to eternal damnation because they didn't know or acknowledge His Son. I mean, so like, if that is the case, then we don't have free will. We are just being limited to the options that God has given us. God could have created an infinite number of universes. He could have placed you in any other kind of universe, but this is the one you find yourself. So, are you really free? You could have been born to any family in any part of the world, but you were born to your family, to your parents. Are you really free? So, okay, I think I've done enough justice to that point. So, moving to the third point, the free will of the perpetrator overrides the free will of the victim. And that's true. And that makes no sense because, okay, God has given everyone free will. So if I decide that I want to assault someone, this is just an example, I'll never do this. But if I decide that I want to assault someone sexually, does that mean my free will is more important than the free will of the potential victim? And for example, when someone gets sexually assaulted, the person who is being sexually assaulted has lost their free will in that moment because nobody wants to be assaulted. But the free will of the perpetrator is overriding her or his own free will, and it seems that God is okay with that. I mean, God could intervene and save a person from sexual assault, but He's just going to stand by and say, okay, if you want to rape, if you want to sexually assault people, then it's fine. It's fine. You will born later, maybe 30, 40, 50 years after you die, you're going to born in hell. But if you want to harm people, scar them, leave them with trauma, I mean, PTSD, fine, go ahead, have your fun. And I just find that very disgusting because, like, God is omnipotent. He can do anything. He can cause the perpetrator to suffer a heart attack instantly and die. He can cause thunder to come out from the sky and strike down this perpetrator. He can do anything, and that is what he chose to do. So it's like he just chose to stand by and be like, hell. So hell is like the gotcha moment, like, do any evil you want, you are going to pay back in the afterlife. But that act of sexual assault could even lead the victim down a very dark path, could lead them to hate God, to hate Christianity, and then the victim also suffers in hell eventually because of what they suffered here on earth, because they couldn't deal with the trauma. It could lead to suicide, which supposedly also leads to hell. So, I mean, the fact that God values the free will of a perpetrator over the free will of a victim is really concerning. Then the fourth point, omniscience overrides free will. And this is true because if God knows everything, then nobody is free. And it's like watching a movie. If you are watching a movie the second time, you already know what is going to happen. Sure, you are not the one causing it to happen. You can rewind the movie, you can forward it, but it's gonna be the same. If you are watching a movie that you've watched before and you see something new or the plot changes, I mean that would be scary. That would be scary. Like if you watch which movie do I really like? If you watch Lord of the Rings for the second time, Fellowship of the Ring, and instead of seeing hobbits and wizards and elves, you start to see transformers there, robots. You that would be you would really need to investigate what is happening. You will need to investigate seriously. The first question you ask yourself is, did I get the wrong copy of the film? Is this a pirated copy? Is this a fake movie? Is this, you know, worst case scenario? The reality of the world has changed. Lord of the Rings is no longer Lord of the Rings. The entire timeline has changed. So what I'm trying to say is that, like, if you look, I think omniscience means that God can see the world play out like a movie. He knows what will happen. Sure, he might not be the one causing it to happen, but he knows. He knows the plot down to the minute details. And so, if God knows the plot down to the minute details, that means none of us are free. He knows our next move. He might not cause it, but he knows. Like when he created man in the Garden of Eden, he knew that they were going to eat from the tree of knowledge and evil, knowledge of good and evil. He knew that was going to happen. He knew that man was going to fall. He knew that there would be a lot of suffering and pain and disaster in the world. And he was okay with it. He was okay with it. Then he was okay with also his grand plan to bring his son to die and save you from hell that he also created, that he also knew was going to be created. It's crazy, man. And I just wish, if you're a Christian listening to this, I just wish you can listen to it objectively before you start to think of a defense to this. I would like you to listen to this objectively with your brain and not your heart. Just listen to the words I'm saying and think for yourself. I'm not trying to talk people out of Christianity. I'm a Christian myself, but I have questions. I think it's important to question reality itself, to question what we were told, not just accept it, because that is how dogmas are created. That is how people are enslaved. To the final point, animals. Animals suffer. Animals suffer because, and if you go back to the fall of man, there was no record of animals committing any sin. Did animals also fall? Or we can say that by extension, man's sin led to the fall of animals. But I don't know. Animals are innocent. Animals cannot sin because they act instinctively. So if the suffering that human beings suffer here on earth can be attributed to free will, and maybe you can say God is testing us. What about the animals? The animals that just act based on instincts, that do not really have consciousness, that do not really have a conscience. Like, why do they suffer too? You know, why? And okay, if you look at an animal like the lion with its sharp teeth and claws, an animal that was basically designed to bring down other animals, kill them for meat. It's like, so, like, if the fall didn't happen, are you saying that maybe a lion wouldn't exist? And if the fall didn't happen, What would the lion be eating then? Since it was designed specifically to kill and bring down other animals, what would the lion have eaten if the fall didn't happen? Would it have been eating apples and vegetables and carrots? And from what we know about biology, it's impossible for a lion to survive on a diet of those things because the lion is built to eat protein, mostly protein. So it's like, hmm, the suffering of animals makes no sense. If human beings suffer because of the fall of man and because of free will, what about the animals? Animals don't have free will. I can say that because they act instinctively. They have things that they must do at a certain time. They don't know why they are doing those things, but it's programmed into their brain. Like the migration of certain birds. Once the time is once the time approaches, the birds begin to fly towards a certain direction. And even for birds in captivity that have no way of learning this act from other birds, they still exhibit the same behavior, flying towards that direction even in their cage. So it shows that animals don't have free will. Animals didn't partake in the sin that led to the fall of man. So why do they suffer? And even when a human being suffers, you can even say, and then they die, you can say his reward is in heaven or he has gone to be with God. The Bible doesn't tell us that animals have an immortal soul or animals get to experience the afterlife. So, I mean, when an animal suffers and dies, didn't it just suffer for nothing? Didn't it suffer for nothing? And so, if beings, because animals are also beings, they are also creations, if creations can suffer for nothing, then it shows that maybe the creator doesn't really give a fuck about suffering. I'm sorry for using this language. He doesn't really give a fuck about his creations, So, and it's concerning. Yeah, so I think I can end it here. This is like the talk I'm doing, first podcast I'm doing. So, thanks for listening. If you did listen up to this point, I'll end it here. My name is Gondais. I have some AI generated music on my Spotify. I have some I recorded myself. And goodbye. Take care of yourself. Have a nice day.